Part 3 of the Reforged Shard, the solo adventure for Dragonbane. Sten Travson, he's struggling right now. He's really struggling. He's about to take on the Mage's Refuge. He's blind, his friend is paralyzed, his other friend is losing his mind, and this is going to test their sanity. Will they survive? Let's find out. Let's go! Hello! Sacred here, and this is the Sacred Art of Gaming, where we're going into part 3 of the Dragonbane Solo Adventure. This is a recap. Make sure you take a look at part 1 and part 2 before taking a look at this one, or else it ain't gonna make no sense. A little bit of a recap, where we ended. They basically needed to get the Abyssal Shard from this powerful cultist. They were able to get it, but boy, was it, there were some problems. There were some great plans, but things went south. And they made a great friend as Sten ended up gaining additional allies as he tried to capture the only ally he had for, safekeeping. That didn't work out for him. He ended up doing a trial by combat, regained the trust, gained new allies. One of those allies is now in lava as far as we know. They did get the Abyssal Shard as they intended to, but a demon was released with a sweet scorpion tail that was able to poison Gorum, who's paralyzed. The demon cursed Sten, who's blind, and then you've got Karathu, who is losing his mind because Bula, his very close platonic ally, is now gone. But he had to pull his shit together to get them out of this crumbling ruin before they lost their lives. So that brings us to the town of Outskirt, where they are trying to fix things, right? And Sten makes the decision he's going to dump pretty much all of his assets, all of his gold, into getting an antidote for Gorum. So the paralysis does end up getting cured after some rest in the town of Outskirt. But he does end up with a permanent negative to his right hand. He's losing feeling in his right hand. So not great, but he's not paralyzed. So that's definitely a step in the right direction. Karathu probably still very upset, but he does have some new armor, some new weapons. Same for Sten and Gorum. And then they also purchased a dog. The dog's name, Anvil. So those are the things that they did. Oh, and Sten, luckily, his blindness, whether it was tied to time or it was tied to distance, it did eventually go away as they were kind of making their way to Outskirt, which is handy because, Karathu was trying to guide him back. So that brings us to part 3, the Mage's Refuge. And before we jump into the first part there, they do stop by the orc encampment to deliver the news of Bula, where there's, a beautiful ceremony, and they kind of say their goodbyes in typical orc fashion, which is not too emotional or sentimental. They got to kind of say their goodbyes nonetheless. That brings us to the Moon Door. And Engulfer Stonegaze, the Wolfkin, that's the ally that's kind of sending them on this journey and feeding them information, lets them know they need to look for the crescent moon symbol on the door, and then from there will be an illusionary wall that they need to look for. Luckily, they do have Anvil the dog, which comes in quite handy in this instance. Engulfer did also provide them with the map, so that did help quite a bit with them finding this location on their way to the Mage's Refuge. Once they find it, between Sten kind of figuring things out, he's pretty solid at spotting hidden things, and then also Anvil and his sense of smell. He's a little bit more in tune to his other senses. They were able to find the illusionary wall and move past that. Anvil was pretty hesitant to move through it, but they eventually convinced him. With food, of course. Oh, and before I forget, the whole reason for this mission, my apologies, is they are trying to retrieve calling stones, which is basically like a fantasy excuse for a cell phone. They're able to communicate from below ground to the surface with these stones. It's a magical artifact that's in this Mage's Refuge. And they've been warned to look out for the troll, the big old mean troll. Be careful. So as they pass through the Moon Door, that brings them to the Petrified Arboretum. It's one of those, I'm sure. And like our party always does, they fail at sneaking, or at least some of them do. So they fail at sneaking. So as they're going through this creepy place, there's, these petrified trees and stuff, which of course there ends up being dryads in this area. And they are warned of the dryads. I believe it's, yes, trees of brittle stone stand in maddening formation. Dryads who once dwelt within have long since become something else. So these are like cursed dryads essentially. And as they're trying to sneak through, and Anvil's kind of growling at the trees and stuff, they come to life and they attack. Two of them, and they are beefy boys. Let me tell you, this really brings them to the limit. So the trees crack and begin to move. Anvil, unfortunately, he's trying to do his best, but his teeth are really having trouble sinking into this bark. And Gorum just gets lit up by these trees. So he goes down fairly quickly. It's kind of down to Karathu and Sten. Sten did pick up a new ability that did help him out quite a bit, Dragon Slayer, I believe, which gives a bonus to monsters. Between him and Karathu, Karathu in his maddened state, he's still kind of angry at the world, so he's using that. He sees that Gorum is down, and he decides that the best defense is a good offense, and he just goes full on, whirlwind with his dual wielding weapons here, goes on the attack, as does Sten. Gorum is like on the verge of dying, so they are able to get rid of these dryads, these cursed dryads, right before Gorum's down, and then they're able to get him back up. There is a chest in the area that Sten is able to open up fairly easily with some lockpicks, and nothing too crazy, just like some jewelry and stuff that he can later sell. Then that brings them to part 3, the excavated mine with the talking statue. This was randomly rolled and ended up being kind of neat, especially in the context of what's going on here for the Mage's Refuge. Essentially, they are trying to walk past the statue moves and greets them and is like, if you take anything from this mine, we're gonna have problems. And there's like, hey, no beef, we're not here to take anything from the mine, this is what we're looking for. And then Sten takes it a little bit further because he's somewhat decent with people and or statues. But he's like, yeah, so we're not going to take anything. We're looking for these calling stones or receiving stones. Yeah, calling stones. Looking for those stones. There's kind of trying to get some more information from the statue. The statue lets him know that this mage is his friend, his very close friend, and he has not seen him in so long that he fears this mortal has perished. But beware the troll, who also was a friend of the mage and still defends this area fiercely. And just know that the mage has many defenses that test more than just your physical attributes. With that said, they pass on to the next area past the statue, to the peering walls. Engulfer lets them know ahead of time. It's not often that the breach gazes back at him, but in this case it does, and this is where it's definitely going to test their sanity. And Karathu being the very clear target here, Karathu has a meltdown. It begins with tears as he's kind of like reliving what happened to Bula and thoughts of his dear friend Bula and how it's, he feels responsible, and he's having like a giant orc toddler meltdown, and it's taken everything because he's a big boy. Sten and Gorum, they're doing everything they can. Sten, he does warn them going into it, like, hey, keep in mind, there's going to be some crazy shit in here, and for the most part, him and Gorum are on the same page. But Karathu just loses it after a couple rolls back and forth with a brief scuffle and a lot of persuading. They're able to get Karathu out of this crazy area with these creepy walls that feels like it is looking at you, and it sometimes literally is looking at you. They eventually make their way through here. They then get to the Forgotten Library. And this was actually random. It doesn't feel random, but it was random. This actually ended up being kind of straightforward. They ended up there was no enemies, just a library with a ton of stuff. None of the people there are necessarily like mages because they lost Bula, but they were able to find a grimoire with a couple spells that none of them can do, but they'll hold on to them for safekeeping for now. There's no exit from this area, but there is a portal, and they kind of just take the decision to, let's jump in this portal. It's got to be the way we're going next, right? What other way are we going? And then that pops them into the maddening Aurori. Oh, yeah, Aurori, the maddening Aurori. Once the mage used this confounding device to chart the flux of the heavens themselves. And it's still, whirling and grinding. It's kind of just an obstacle at this point. Nobody's actively using it. Sten is somewhat mechanically inclined, so he's trying to figure it out. He's trying to figure out where he can apply leverage to this device and slow it down, break it, something. So as he's kind of walking around and he's analyzing it, he does find an area where he can access the gears and stuff, and he's able to get some tools in there and pull out some pieces that expose what he believes to be a weak spot. And with a couple well-placed hammer strikes between him and his allies in certain parts of the Aurori, they are able to break it down. Obviously, it took more time than me just breaking it down right here. It ended up being like a skill challenge is kind of how I ended up breaking it down. But yeah, between the two blacksmiths, that almost felt like enough. Gorum and Sten having some blacksmith knowledge being just enough to kind of help them in something that's it's not really blacksmithing, but it's like the core concepts are there. Steam ends up spins until it kind of breaks down. They avoid some potential damage as pieces fly and stuff, but they are good to continue to the next area. The endless stair, and as soon as they show up, of course, enough time has passed by this point that the troll appears. Oh, I did forget to mention there was a little bit of foreshadowing. They did find a dead troll in the Forgotten Library. It was a female troll, and they remembered that the statue referred to the troll as he, so they were like, there may be another troll. Here is that troll. That troll just comes in like a bat out of hell, just attacking them. Sten tries to take a moment to speak to the troll, but the troll is not having it. That troll ends up picking up Karathu, who's like the biggest one out of the bunch by far, and just munching on him. And he just has this noxious breath just in Karathu's face, and in some cases, Karathu is in the troll's face. So this kind of leaves it up to, Karathu's somewhat out of commission here. He's taken his turns to really just stop the troll from continuing to munch on him even more. But this ability that some of the gold that Sten spent was also on training, which did result in him getting another ability. Made me happy. I think the Dragon Slayer ability, he's able to use it against monsters. Ended up using it against the troll. Ended up doing a ton of damage as the troll is heavily focused on Karathu. Gorum's just, he's surviving. He's surviving. He's got a shield now, so that helps. But yeah, he does a ton of damage, and then the troll spits out Karathu and kind of runs for the hills. So this is another one of those situations where Engulfer did kind of warn them that, like, hey, these stairs are like also another thing that's could lead to you losing your mind because they are endless. So they take a little rest and then they go up these stairs. So as they are going up these stairs, they're realizing, yep, they are not going anywhere, but they do happen to find some clues that are kind of etched into the walls as they're going up these stairs. And eventually, between the group of them, they decipher, with the help of the grimoire that they found, kind of pointed them towards, it was very, it was not straightforward at all, but the random roll that I made was ancient knowledge, which pointed them towards the grimoire. The grimoire ends up saying something about, like, to get to where the mage's study is, one must have faith or take a leap of faith or something along those lines. So they're just kind of like, there's nowhere for us to jump. What are some other ways that we can do that? And they decide they're going to close their eyes and walk up the stairs and just believe that there's no place like home. They're going to believe that they can actually make it up the stairs. So they do that. There ends up being, a roll for this. And Sten is the only one that ends up having trouble. And they all make it. And then Sten, he ends up just tumbling back. They are now at the top as the stairs just keep moving. But Anvil is actually able to bite onto Sten's arm and hold on to him before he goes any further. And then they pull him back up. And he's able to get up there, and they can move on with their lives. They get into this mage's study. Now they're at the top of this tower here, and they keep trying to light things, and they're realizing that light will not penetrate the darkness in there. And this is interesting because the brief time that Sten ended up blind, it actually ends up assisting him here because it's complete darkness, and Engulfer did warn them, do not take anything other than the calling stones here. So he's kind of feeling around, he's walking, and eventually he is able to find the calling stones within the mage's study without too much of an issue. He's making sure that he's telling his party members, do not take anything unless you believe it's the calling stones. If you think it's the calling stones, let me know. I'll come over to you, and just be careful because there could be weird mage traps in here. And that was the end of the third part. Another solid adventure, and they take that, they leave, and then they head back. But on the way back, they return to the statue, and they let it know that they did not see the mage, and they have the calling stones, and that they did not touch anything else. The statue appreciates them letting it know on its way out, but says, don't ever return here. I need time to mourn. So they leave. They let Engulfer know, hey, we got the fantasy cell phone, and we are good to go. So what'd you think? Part 3 for this solo adventure, Sten Travson, the Reforged Shard, alone in Deepfall Breach through Dragonbane. Comment down below what your favorite parts are, or things that you wish happened, anything like that. Or if you want to see other stuff that's similar to this. Don't forget to stay tuned for part 4, which is the Soul Tree. And like always, thanks for watching. That's Sacred out.